Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar. You are here for the Insights for Everyone, Data Analytics for Leadership, Staff, and Board. So as you're coming in, a few things for you. If you requested CPE or CAE credits, there is a monitoring mechanism within GoToWebinar that's going to be utilized for compliance. So there's no need for you to do any additional things. We've got you covered. All right, so the flow of our webinar today is going to be basically what you see on the screen. The webinar will be recorded, of course, and we're going to go through the introduction of the speakers, but then we have a section for you called Ask the Audience. And within that Ask the Audience section, we do encourage you to utilize the question tab at any time to put some comments into us. It's a great opportunity for you to inform your speakers and the instructors and anyone else involved in this webinar. It's a chance for us to hear what's top of mind for you. And you'll see that slide in just a second, but I do want to encourage you that we do really desire to see your questions and comments throughout the webinar. You will remain muted through the webinar, but if you look for that question tab, for me it's to the right of my screen, but for you it may be at the bottom. I'm not sure where it's going to appear for you, but it's the question tab, and you can put comments or questions both in there, and we will be monitoring that as we go through the webinar. The webinar itself is approximately 65 minutes with built-in time and additional 15 to 20 minutes built in for Q&A. But again, we will be doing Q&A all the way throughout the webinar. Your instructors today are Rob Miller, who's the Senior Vice President of Revenue at Gravitate, Terry Dowdy, Director of IT and Web Services at Tax Executives Institute, as well as Lacey Packard. She is the Director of IT at American Association for Justice. I am Julie Duncan. I am your moderator, along with Wade Tetsuka, and we are with U.S. Transaction Corporation. So I wanted to show you, you had some survey questions that when you registered, you would have answered these survey questions. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on those. We found them actually quite interesting. Your first question was, in what areas do you think your association would most benefit by having improved data and analytics? More than 50% of you answered member engagement or member retention, with member engagement being 35% of the answer, which I found rather interesting. Your second question was, what analytic reporting capabilities are you most in need of developing or improving? And a whopping 39% of you said analytics or trends application, with 33% more of you saying dashboards, right? So we had, again, at 70% of your answers in these two right here. And then finally, we had this free area for you to put short answers in. And we did an AI generated word cloud for the question, what primary benefits do you believe improved data and analytics would provide to your organization? And the majority of you with this cloud generator put in here decision making. It would drive your decision making, with member engagement being a close second. So I hope that these survey results are informative to you. We will be including the full survey results in the follow-up email that you'll get after this webinar. But I think that you'll find it interesting to see that you and your peers are pretty well on the same page in what you're thinking about. So this slide right here is our Ask the Audience slide. And I would say to you that this is one of the most important things for us today, because not only do you find out and inform, you inform us as the panel, but additionally, you'll find some things where your peers are likely, if you're thinking the question, your peers are likely thinking the question. So in this moment, if you will, I would encourage you to put into the question tab One of two things, what you would either like to get out of this webinar today, or what's top of mind for you today. We're going to pause here for a second because we really would like to hear from you regarding this. Wade, I'm going to turn over to you at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna read off some of the comments so that Rob, the instructors, Rob and Terry and Lacey are aware, but actually they would see this too, but I think the audience would not necessarily see some of these comments. Max had said, I would like to get some new ways of thinking on data and analytics. Amy said maybe the top 5 analytics for retention and the top 5 for recruitment. Andy said how to drive culture change using data analytics. That's really powerful. Anna said a better understanding of data gathering or data we may already have that we aren't utilizing in decision making. And I've seen Rob's presentation and Terry and Lacey's before, so they're definitely going to address these things. Someone talked about best practices. I'd like to see some examples of dashboards. They've got some great dashboard examples that you're going to see. So love these questions. So if you haven't put anything in, please keep those comments and those comments coming in, because Terry, Rob, and Lacey will see them and it will help them. So the format for the rest of the presentation is a combination actually of some video recording clips, as well as having Rob and Lacey and Terry being here live with you to interact with all of you as an audience. And the interaction is going to be mainly through that questions tab. So this is great, having this combination of video and the live, because during the video, you could actually pose some questions as they come to your mind when you're listening to the video. You can pose some of those questions, and if it's Terry's video, he'll answer you right in the chat, in the questions tab, or when we're doing Lacey's video, she'll answer you right in the questions section during the course of the video. And then, of course, after the video is finished, there'll be a Q&A. So with that, because I think we got some really nice quality questions. Leanne said, I'd like to have a deeper dive into the software and sample usage as we're considering to upgrade our analytics software, you know, as we speak. So, so really good comments. But at this point, I'm not the expert. I'm going to turn it over to the experts. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob Miller and have you take it away, Rob.
Very good. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being here. And we have a clip here we're going to get started on, and then we'll jump back in and start chatting again. Thank you, Julie, and thank you and your team for putting this awesome event together today. And we are so pleased to be able to be a big part of it. And I'm also very pleased to have wonderful speakers who have agreed to join us for this. So you're going to be in for a treat. Our philosophy at Gravitate is data analytics for everyone. And I really want to make sure that everyone is able to understand the concepts that all the speakers will be talking about. So I thought what we would do is we would begin with a couple of items that will help bring everybody up to a great starting place. So the first item is data governance. With any type of data analytics initiative, we recommend that you do some amount of data governance. And the concept behind that is really getting a handle on what data you have, prioritizing it, getting executive support to do this initiative. And at the very lowest level, you might end up being focused on terms and definitions, and that can be very important so everybody is working from the same sheet of music. You're also going to be here, our speakers, talking about a data lake and data blending. Two very important concepts when it comes to analytics. First, the data lake. It really is a modern data warehouse. It's where all of your data from all of your system goes, and usually it's built with big data technology, so it can handle a lot of data. And you probably have a lot of systems at your office. The idea is that you want to take all that data and blend it together into the data lake so it becomes very useful. We did a little bit of study and found that most organizations, only 20% of the data they have is actually in their AMS or their CRM system. So as you can imagine, if you're only doing analytics on data in your membership system, you're really missing out on a lot, because you really want to be looking at the activity in social media, your email, on your website, all that type of thing. So data blending, bringing all that data together is very, very important. The next major concept is data transformation. That's when the data makes it into the data lake, and then you want to improve it before you start using it for analysis. One might be just correcting bad data that's in your existing systems. A second might be simplifying the complexity of the data. An example of that might be, you might have a data element such as join date. Well, wouldn't it be nice to convert that into tenure for your members, and then you can analyze the data based on tenure? Just makes the data easy, simplifying it. And ultimately, you want to put the system and in the data in the hands of all your users and make that really available to everyone. And then ultimately, the part that we're almost familiar with is really the visualizations and dashboards that come with any great data analytics tool. And in this case, we're looking at a classic executive dashboard where there's been a bunch of different visualizations that have been brought together. And so maybe an executive team can look at that and make real quick decisions about important matters of the business. So when you're done building a data analytics initiative, you're going to end up with this kind of concept where you're pulling data from all your various important systems, you're blending it together, because really the key to understanding your members is having insight from your data analytics. So our first segment today, I'm pleased that I'll be joined by Terry Dowdy, who's the IT director at TEI, and we'll be talking about data insights for everyone. I hope you enjoy that segment, all the other segments, and that you get a lot out of all this information that our speakers will be providing you today. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Miller, and I'm with Gravitate Solutions. In this segment, we will be focusing on insights for everyone, analytics for leadership, staff, and the board. And I'm pleased to introduce my client and good friend, Terry Dowdy, who is the Director of Information Technology and Web Services from the Tax Executives Institute. Terry has been the IT Director for 4 associations and has been a regular contributor to the association industry through ASAE and many other industry organizations. I have a funny little story to tell about Terry as well, which will unfortunately date both of us. Back in 1999, Terry was a client of mine when he was at the Optical Society, and he called me at 11:50 p.m. right before Y2K to make sure that his servers and everything were going to be operational. I, of course, tried to comfort him and tell him we were ready to go, but I have to be honest with you, I was quite worried about what was going to happen, didn't know what we would do if things went bad, but as we all know, things were just fine. So as you can see, Terry and I have been through a lot together over all this time. So Terry, please further introduce yourself and TEI, and also be sure to describe the organization's data sophistication, the size of the IT department, and executive support so the listeners can understand the environment in which you operate.
Thanks, Rob. And yes, it has been a long time, and you know you. That story brought me back. But good times. I think I went out to a party after that.
I think we both did.
Yeah, like Rob said, I have worked at numerous associations in the 23 years I've been in the association IT space. I am currently the IT director at the Tax Executives Institute. This is a professional society for tax professionals in the corporate world. Large companies, so Fortune 500 companies that have huge tax departments. The people who work in those departments, those are our members. We have about 6,800 members currently. In 2018, our budget was a little over 10 million. We currently have 20 staff, and we concentrate on advocacy, but not advocacy for any specific industry, rather the pragmatic application of tax regulations, regardless of the country. Primarily right now, the US, Canada, and Europe, which is where we have all of our members. Currently, the TEI uses NetForum as its association management system. It's been using it for about 7 years now. And we're fairly sophisticated with its use, but like most associations, we don't use it to the fullest extent we could. Then we also have the rest of the things with Office and things like that. And our accounting is through Great Plains. We are not totally in the cloud yet. NetForum is the first part that's in the cloud, our backup systems, but we still have premise-based files and premise-based accounting systems.
Great. So tell the group, what challenges prompted you to acquire a data analytics platform?
Challenges that drove us to look for a data analytics system was that we didn't really know enough about our data, and we were making decisions that were not necessarily data driven. They were anecdotally driven. We thought we knew why something happened, and so we proceeded on that premise. For example, we would schedule meetings and seminars to be near some of our larger chapters, not going back and analyzing exactly where everybody was attending that meeting was coming from, or if there was a chance that by holding the meeting someplace else or the seminar, we do a lot in our educational offerings, holding that someplace else would garner better attendance. So we really were flying kind of blind when we think about it now.
So what data did you blend into your data lake? What kind of data did you take that from NetForum and other systems to make available for this kind of analysis you needed to do?
Well, we started with our membership data because that was the biggest chunk of data we really had, everything about all of our members, their demographics, but also what they spent, committees and chapters, etc. Then we went with events. We wanted to go with membership first, get a handle on using our data analytics package Nucleus with a membership, then go pull in events and start really getting down and comparing them all in combination with chapters and committee use.
So in that process, then which department did you focus on first?
Membership, our membership department specifically. Now we're a small organization, so people do wear different hats, or multiple hats rather. And our membership department is there's only 2 people actively in that department, just like my IT department, there's only 2 of us. So we have to really focus our time on what is most important at that moment, or what is most important according to our strategic plan for the organization as set by our board. Membership retention, membership joins, these have been identified as the most important aspect of our organization that we need to focus on right now, because we have seen a drop in membership.
So you have this drop in membership, and obviously everybody's concerned about it. So what have you done to get the staff involved to help solve that and use the analytics to maybe start providing some answers?
One thing right off the bat was that it was easier for staff to be able to go in and look at the data through Nucleus than going in and running a query through NetForum, because even though NetForum is an excellent association management system, it still has some quirks. It's not the easiest thing in the world to learn if you do not come from a data background, or if you do not have some grounding in logic. Sometimes it can be confusing. Why did you get duplicate records? And Nucleus, it avoids all that. It gives us straight data and lets us know what's happening. So staff was able to get involved and see where we have problems with our data. Like all associations, we have bad data. We need to clean it up. And in order to clean it up, we have to identify it, and Nucleus helps us do that. That was the first thing.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting. When I was working at 340B Health, an association of hospitals, before joining Gravitate, we implemented Nucleus too. And that was one of the big things that I found, is that at that organization we ran IMIS, But our users are very afraid to run those reports. They found them complicated. They constantly were getting the wrong answers. But with the dashboards, the answers were just there, and it just made it so much simpler for them. So it was easier to get them involved in using it.
And that's what we really have to do. It needs to be about the data and about the result of that data and what you're going to do with it, not about how you gathered that data. It's not about the software, it's about the solution. And that's where we need to focus. And that's where our staff can focus now, because they don't have to worry about spending time running a query or what they learned 2 months ago about running it or export it to Excel, et cetera, et cetera.
So what about the executives? Have you been able to get them to rely on the data or use the system? Any groups that you've had real success with?
Actually, just recently in the past 3 months, we've been able to get our membership committee to use the executive dashboard in Nucleus. Now, our membership committee is made up of volunteer leaders in the organization, in our membership. These are members of the board usually, who are on the membership committee and have to look at every application for membership and approve it. In order to become a member of TEI, it's not automatic. You have to meet the criteria, and it needs to be examined to make sure that you in fact do. And that's what happens with our membership committee. And they are also tasked with retention and renewals. And Nucleus is giving them a tool to really dig down and see what's going on with our membership, who our members are, where they're coming from.
Now, what about COVID? I mean, obviously, it's impossible to have any kind of discussion without bringing that elephant in the room. Has that increased your dependence on analytics or pushed you harder in any directions?
It's interesting. Because of COVID, we had to pivot to a virtual annual conference. It's the first time we've done this. Annual conference is one of our big conferences. And we went all virtual this year. We just concluded, as a matter of fact. And we had increased attendance, more revenue than we normally would have. And Nucleus is allowing us to see the people who attended, the membership of the people, and where they're coming from, what chapters, what geographic region, quicker. A lot easier than going in through our AMS and doing it, or going into SQL and doing it. It's almost instantaneous. This allowed us to see things, and for the after action review, we could report on it, where we need to improve. Chapter leaders could see this when we pass the information to them. And of course, it's visual. So it's much easier for them to comprehend and understand.
Well, and I think we actually have a chart here that's just kind of on this topic. Maybe you can chat through it a little bit.
Yes, excellent. And if you see up there on the top left-hand corner, let me pull it over here so I can see it. So you can see the top left-hand corner of the screen. The blue line there is our recent conference, our 2020 conference. And if you notice, we opened up registration late because, again, we were going with a virtual conference. We had a lot of stuff to implement, to create new registration processes and stuff. But it skyrocketed to the highest in that little amount of time. And that was just fantastic. We were really thrilled about that. And if you see on the right-hand side, it exceeded all expectations there. It was the best annual conference we've had so far. And it's so easy to show this in a board meeting right after the conference.
And then we also had some a slide here with some of your membership demographics. Maybe you can give us some thoughts on these.
Yeah, this is great, and it really allows our membership committee, but also our other members of our staff and of our board to go in and look and see who our members are, where they break down as far as gender and by the length of time they have had in tax itself. And that's what tenure means down there in the bottom left-hand corner. How many years have they spent in the corporate tax world? And then we have the members by age up in the top right-hand corner. And that's really great. You notice the filters there. I always have that open on my screen pretty much because I can just go and click and basically change this data all around anytime I need to. And that's really fantastic. It allows me to see so many different things that ordinarily I would have to spend a lot of time in queries, in SQL, in Excel, massaging it. And don't get me started on trying to create charts. So here they're great. It's really easy for everybody to understand, but also to make decisions on. Because I like to say, one thing that we weren't doing with data is using it to decide where to hold our educational offerings, our seminars, our courses, and our conferences. We were going with just anecdotal data, like where is the largest chapter? Let's hold it there this year. How many chapters are around this city? Let's hold our course there. Now we have data that can drive that decision, and we'll know specifically where our attendees are coming to every course, because it's not just our conferences, but we also have 4-day courses in tax and federal tax and 3-day seminars. These things are important and big revenue streams for us, and we really need to make the right decisions.
That's great. Now, you also indicated that some of this data, it's pointing out to you that you said this to me earlier, but some of this data is telling you that there's some actual issues with it.
Yes, exactly. One of the things, and we were told this when we signed on with Nucleus, but it we just said, well, okay, that's a sales pitch. But it's true. We are finding where we need to improve our data. And that's huge. Like I said earlier, everybody has bad data. We all know it. We all struggle with trying to clean it up and keep it clean. This gives us a way of seeing at a glance where that problem is and what records that problem affects and what we need to do to fix it. And that's just fantastic. That saves so much time, but it also, these are the type of tasks that usually get pushed to the side because something else is more important. But it's so quick to do this that it's easy to say, okay, these records need to be fixed, and then pass that off to the membership coordinator to work on them.
Yeah, so you can just hand the membership coordinator, access to this chart, and they see which non-specifieds, and they know which ones they got to go fix.
Exactly.
So a couple of rapid fire questions here to kind of wrap this thing up. So if you could go back, what would you have told yourself before you got started that would actually have improved the process?
Prioritize the work with this and make implementing a data analytics solution, regardless of the package, the priority for that length of time. We thought we would implement it quickly, but then we found as we got into it that there were other projects were coming up, and that delayed the implementation. So that's one thing. I'll make that a priority.
What about other recommendations for the listeners?
Be patient and manage your expectations. You are not going to solve all of your problems right away just because you can see the data in a chart, but it's going to give you the tools you need. You just need to be patient and use them.
And then finally, Terry, what's the next thing you plan to do? It sounds like you've done a lot with membership and events. What's next on the docket?
We really want to look at our members' individual interests, because we ask that on their membership application when they join, and we ask them periodically throughout their tenure. We want to see what those interests are and try to match those up with some of our committees, because our committee participation by members is very low, and a lot of new members never even know that we have so many committees that deal with a specific subject. It's not just like Finance Committee and the board. It's things like the Federal Income Tax Committee, the Canadian Indirect Tax Committee, things like that. These committees that actually work on that area of corporate tax. Members don't know that necessarily. We need to match them up with that, and Nucleus is going to help us do that. Awesome.
Well, that will conclude this segment. Thank you very much, Terry, for your outstanding input. It's been a pleasure having you work with you on this project, and obviously I'm sure our listeners have been very pleased to hear your real world examples of what's working and where you're going next.
I hope it helped. I hope to help somebody out there, and I'm happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Greetings, everyone. So we're going to shift now to the live audio Q&A. And we've had several questions come in wanting to hear more about the bad data that was mentioned. What sort of bad data was pinpointed, or what were some of the first steps taken to address the problem of bad data? Can we start there?
I'll make a few comments about that. One of the things that anytime you go through a data analytics project, you can use the opportunity to correct bad data. And I think there was a little bit of a indication of that just a few moments ago, where if you set up your charts correctly, you can have this unspecified category. So if you have everyone who has a professional designation, and so you want to have an unspecified category, because that way you'll immediately identify the records that they'll still appear, they'll be in the counts, you won't lose those records, but they'll be set as an unspecified, and that way it just points out data to be corrected. And it also, the other thing it does is it then makes your counts correct. You won't have people coming up to you and say, hey, we've got 3,000 members, but in this particular chart we only have 2,700 that appear, and it's because they're not appearing because they don't have a designation. So it's one of the simple ways to deal with data challenges.
Yeah, hi. This is Terry. Sorry for that. And yes, Rob, I was muted. But for us, I typed this answer in. There were certain data points, elements that were obvious. For example, we don't have members who have been in the field for 90 years. For us, demographics have been very important because we were looking at specific cohorts in our membership population to see how we can tailor our educational offerings towards them. We're also looking for getting younger members into the field, but also into our association. And so seeing things like that, the length of time in the field, the length of time definitely in the association, because some people have gone out and then come back in 2 years later, and we have to track that so we can see their total time in the association. Seeing things like that, you can readily see where that's going to be bad and go in and fix it. For other things, basic things like addresses and stuff, we have other tools for that we run. We run them on a continuous basis to correct that. And then finally, with some elements, we'll actually just call them or email them and say, hey, can you correct this, or can you tell me if this is actually true? And that comes with people who will say they are the chief tax officer, they'll indicate they're the chief tax officer, yet they have not been in the field for more than 6 or 7 years. And that's really, it could happen, but we don't see it that often. So that tells us we need to go and dig deeper on that.
David had asked if you're using NetForum Pro or Enterprise, and I think you had answered in the question tab that you're using Enterprise. One of the other questions around NetForum was Heather had asked if you were using, sorry, maybe that wasn't Heather, had asked if you were using any, Shannon asked, using any dashboard functionality in NetForum before using Nucleus.
No, we were not. We were not. They the baseline dashboards really weren't useful for our leadership, and for the rest of us, we normally were seeing the information differently. And now that now we are using the dashboard now, of course, especially for events, so that our executive director doesn't have to come to us every 5 minutes asking how many people we have. But we were not using the built-in dashboards in NetForum before Nucleus.
Hey, Wade, I want to add a little bit to that too. And in fact, it dovetails to some other questions. Somebody said, Donna said, we have data, now what? We had somebody else say, I'd like to have recommendations on way to pull data from multiple sources. And somebody asked a question, we have a lot of data click-throughs from email, how to best translate. And this is one of the reasons why somebody might not choose to say use NetForum or use Personify or some other AMS for their dashboarding, because you end up with dashboarding of just data that's in your AMS. And to do really strong data analytics and to really feed the member engagement scoring. I know that was a big item people cared about, is that you need to be pulling data from all your various systems. You need it from your AMS, your email marketing tool, your community, your LMS. So you bring that data all together and then you blend it, and then it becomes really powerful. And so I just thought I would add that little extra piece given some of the other questions.
Here was a couple of questions on demographics where Anne had asked, well, Amy had asked, how are you using demographics to tailor your training, for example?
We used to just hold seminars, live in-person seminars, based on the size of our chapters in the country, and that was anecdotal, actually, because we know the size of the chapters, of course, but we didn't know if that was going to really boost the numbers for attendance. And we now can see where our people are coming from that attended our conferences or our seminars in the past, and tailor training towards areas that would meet that in hopes to bring in more people. That's one example of how we do that.
Terry, there was another question here where somebody was curious. It was actually Barbara. She was curious about, data that you might have shared with your board versus data that you're maybe just would keep internally. Did you have any decisions or thoughts around that?
Yes, we do, and it ties into a question that I believe Anne or Neelis, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, asked about following current data protection laws in this country and in Europe and Latin America, South America. We are very careful not to share anything with our board or with our chapters that is identifiable if it doesn't have a specific reason that is already covered by our privacy policy. For example, using information for renewal purposes. And we are very careful to make sure that you can only use it once, and we track that, and we have training with our board and our chapter leaderships on that every year. So that's one example of what we don't share just willy-nilly. In other words, they cannot get that information just through their dashboard. They would have to come to staff to get that. Another example may be internal financial data that's used for our decision making. We don't share that with everybody because we spend all of our time answering questions. We share it with the officers. We share it with the people who would have access to it anyway. And we're not hiding anything. Obviously, if somebody asks, if one of our members asks, we'll definitely share it with them. But if we just shared that on our dashboards, it would really, they'd be asking, well, why is this that? Why is that this? And we'd spend all of our time answering questions, and it's not that we're hiding anything. We just don't have the time for that. We're a small staff.
Well, and just to add to that too, Terry, so a good data analytics platform gives you the option to share different visualizations with your board than with your staff. So it is possible that you could create an executive dashboard for your executive team. I don't know, maybe it has 10, 12 metrics on it that you want for internal, and then maybe you have a separate one that you share with the board that they can log into, that maybe they only see 3 or 4. And those are maybe ones that Terry has spent the time to explain to them what they mean, and so that he doesn't get follow-on questions. So there's a couple of options there in the way you can handle that.
Terry, I thought there was a good question here from Kate about, she says, I've always been taught never to collect data I won't use. And so maybe you can discuss about your data selection process.
Yes, and I see that the data, how does gender data actually used to make a decision? We don't make a decision based on gender data, but we do use that data to make sure that we are inclusive on all of our educational offerings and all of our membership benefits, so that we are being able to offer the most to everybody that's eligible for membership. We want to track and see if we are subconsciously doing anything that may, I'm trying to word this properly, maybe negative towards somebody based on gender or based on race or any of those other factors. So that's where that information comes in. We want to make sure that our diversity and our inclusiveness, our programs are actually working.
So Terry, I think we hit on a little bit of this when we had our discussion a few moments ago, but I thought this was a question that you might want to add a little bit more color to. This was a question from Michelle, and she says, how to get started if data analytics is not currently being utilized in my organization? So how would you, what would you recommend to someone who's looking to get started at the beginning?
Well, we always knew that we were not basing our, where we hold our seminars and our courses, we were not using data to inform those decisions. We were going based on anecdotal information or a gut feeling. So that was a big one for us. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've had to put all of our live courses on hold, but that will definitely come into play once everything opens back up again. That was a big one for us because we get a good chunk of our revenue from those offerings, and it's part of our mission. The other was looking at aging out in the field. We, I think all of professional associations deal with this. You have the older members who are now retiring and leaving the field, but are you getting younger members in to replace them and increase those numbers? And that's one that we're definitely looking at, because our membership numbers have been going down, and a lot of that is due to aging out in the field. So
with any, like, maybe best practices is the best way to ask the question. Is there a couple of things that if you were starting all over again, that you'd want to be certain that you recommended to someone to do so that they got off on a really good start?
Yes, one part of that is managing expectations. That's a big one. Making sure we don't overpromise things to our board, to our committees, to our membership in general, and to our staff. It's, any data analytics platform, it's not going to fix every problem you may have internally, but it will help you fix some of them. And you just have to remember and know which one's it's going to work on, which one is not. Data analytics is not going to help you if you have an internal culture that's bad. So we don't use it to fix everything. We make sure we manage our expectations. Like, we're not going to see an ROI right away. It takes time, and you have to use it, and you have to get people to use it. If you haven't been using data analytics, and if nobody has been, and in fact, the term itself scares some staff who are not in the IT field or in the statistics and data fields, you have to show them how it's going to help them in their job so that they will be using it. And you have to show them what data it is. You have to show them, look, if you see something that seems really weird, let us know, because there might be a problem in the data.
Welcome back, everyone. In this segment, we'll be focusing on organization-wide metrics, how a data analytics solution can help you get agreement on your data. And I'm pleased to introduce our client, Lacey Packard. Lacey is the Director of Information Technology at the American Association of Justice and has been a regular contributor to the association industry through ASAE and other industry organizations. And Lacey has other talents too. When it comes to singing, she is a near virtuoso and has been known to grab the mic at industry conferences during karaoke night. So Lacey, please introduce yourself further and AJ, and also be sure to describe your organization's data sophistication, size of the IT department, and executive support so the listeners can understand the environment in which you operate.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So my name is Lacey Packard. I'm Director of IT for the American Association for Justice. We represent thousands of members across 12 different association types. I myself have been working for association space about 13 years now. Started off in membership, spent about 5 years in memberships. I have a really healthy appreciation for how hard those folks work. But I've been at AAJ for the last 8 years, been the IT director for the last 3 years almost. We are a professional society. We have individual memberships and organizational memberships. And we have about 100 staff supporting us at AAJ. In our IT department, we have 4 people. One person that specifically works in our NetForum database, and I and a few others help run our analytics program at AAJ.
That's great. So what project goals prompted you to acquire a data analytics solution?
So about 4 or 5 years ago, we started talking about the number of reports and data that we were using and how fast that data was getting outdated, actually. And it was becoming a very frustrating point for our membership team. So we were working with them and talking about different data solutions, and we started taking our first steps forward then to working more with data analytics across the membership department to start with. Some other goals that we had besides just starting working with them was for a couple of other of our departments, we wanted to set some baseline goals and make sure that year over year we're tracking, we're tracking data consistently.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's pretty common that somebody wants to get those baseline goals in alignment. So now, obviously, you have a lot of systems since you're a big organization. Why don't you talk to us about, the systems you brought in, where the priorities were, what did you blend into your data lake?
Sure. So when we started those years ago, we were really looking to blend our NetForum data, which is our enterprise system. We use it for event registration, for membership, both at the national and chapter level, and we also use it as our full AR system. So we have a lot of data that sits over in NetForum. We also have our website, which we use Google Analytics to track our members' traffic throughout our site. We use NetForum for fundraising as well. We also integrated into the data lake the Informs platform, its data, and also our community data from Hired Logic. So we have quite a few different sources in our lake. And what that's led to is some really interesting insights across that in our users' behavior.
And of course, for some of you who may not know, the Informs data would be her email. So that was one of the things that would have been added. So, when you're thinking, Lacey, about the data, then what were your strategies to get your staff involved? Did you go department by department, or, what was your methods to getting this organizational-wide involvement?
So as I mentioned before, we started with our membership team, and really our strategy in that was give them an invested interest in this, take some of that weight off of them with the amount of hours. And so we thought we'd start with one department and roll it out from there. Our membership department didn't adopt it originally the way that we wanted them to, or thought they would, or as fast as they would. But with working with them, and there was actually some change in leadership in that department, we were able to change our strategy a little in the future after working with that department, and I made it a cornerstone of one of their projects, was how we were going to do our data analytics. And so specifically for us, it was getting them involved in the Nucleus product that would help them track their new member joins over a certain period of time and how much revenue came in with that. And by making it a cornerstone of that project, that director then started going and talking to other people about how great it was, so easy for them to track this. And now it has grown organically through the association how we wanted it to. We just had to re-engage them in a different way.
That's a really common story that I've heard across our clients, is that, you have these ideas that people are just going to embrace this right away, and it takes time. And but once that they start to understand that it's actually sometimes easier to get the data this way than maybe ways they did in the past, then, they almost start to become your best cheerleaders. So
yeah,
that's kind of a common story I've heard. What about the executives, though? Are you getting them to rely on the data at all? And have you found, any need to do any like agile analytics at all?
Yeah, so um, the membership project that I was speaking of a minute ago, that director actually reports to my boss. And so we shared the same boss. And so as she was using this tool and she really liked it, she brought it to him because he wanted to see these numbers in like a real time. And he's our chief marketing officer. And so he was able to access it on his machine at work, on his phone, take it to board meetings, like all of those things that we use Nucleus for. And he is now telling our COO, hey, we can do this for this group. We can talk about these kind of numbers. And him and I are having more conversations about how do we get executives engaged with this kind of data.
So I have to ask, as much as we'd like this all to go away, has COVID, impacted your business? I'm assuming the answer is yes. And more importantly, has it increased your dependence on analytics and data at all?
So yes, this kind of all came together at a right time for us. I mean, this is never a good thing, but what we've been able to get out of it has been a lot of member engagement. We recently launched a website, let's say in July, so about midway through where we are with COVID, and we weren't easily tracking some things on our old site that we now can do on our new site. And so being able to see how it's changed that tracking and also some of the numbers that we've been able to track, it's made us more dependent on analytics. We're finding little nuggets here in the details about women. If you offer something this way, they're purchasing at a different rate than men are this way. We're looking at all sorts of different demographics to see what our members are now doing in this pandemic so we can pivot our association. I'm sorry, I laugh. Pivot is just become the word of the year, I feel like.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
In fact, so let's do a pivot ourselves here. And, I have a series of like charts. Why don't we go through those and,
Sure.
and why don't you talk through each of these charts, kind of how they were useful to you and that kind of thing. So here was the first one on member retention.
Mm-hmm. So we use this chart in Nucleus to start to gauge our membership retention each year. We have a universe of those eligible, those retained, and a renewal rate. We do start to look a few months out. We start sending our invoices out to members 4 months before they renew. And so what this helps us do is it always does kind of look like a waterfall for us. It's kind of the way I think about it. And each month out is just how far we are until people renew. And so as we're looking at those numbers, being able to see them at a high level, that it's maintaining year over year, month over month, the way that we think it should be is kind of a reassurance in this time of COVID to make sure our numbers aren't fluctuating wildly. We feel like we have a much better heartbeat or a finger on the heartbeat of our association.
And I know that you can filter on this and like go down another level. So you could pick a certain demographic group. As you were talking about women earlier, you could just look at women or just look at a certain segment. Have you found that to be useful?
Yeah, that's been incredibly useful for us. Filtering is probably one of the things that we rely on heaviest in Nucleus. That is, we have a number of priorities at AAJ when it comes to diversity. And so we often look at the ratio of our demographics and make sure that like what our membership looks like, what our education programs looks like. And so those are always very useful for us.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so then you've got a couple of other charts here.
Yeah, so this, and you'll notice kind of here, we have a switch in our view of the software that we're seeing here. And this is actually going into our agile analytics sessions, and we use Power BI here. And I will say one thing before we start, like our office uses Office 365. So Power BI is a product that we have for free to use as part of our package with that. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to share some of these files back and forth and let our staff even go in a little deeper. So it's really strong. It's really great. We have this opportunity to use this software. Specifically here, what we were looking at was our membership trends by region year over year. And one program that we had put into into effect about 8 years ago was having different membership staff. So specifically, we call them regional managers in different areas of the United States. And so what we were able to see with this was the places that we were inserting people and specific times we were placing them there was the membership growing. And so there's some of these places you can see that grew, like the Northeast, and also it was also some of our Southwest area as well. It is always really interesting to get into this because once you expand some of those regions, you can get into specific states and really nail down where those joints happened. And it's always interesting conversation because we usually know what event or what was going on during that time. So we're usually able to bring it back to not only the person, but maybe also an event that was happening at that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so this data came out of Nucleus, but it came or so out of the data lake, but into like Power BI, right?
Yes.
And then I think you got a number of things on some sales data that I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So we, as I mentioned before, we're an association for attorneys, and we sell a product we call Litigation Packets, and we sell these one at a time, flat rate. And what we were looking at here was, did people buy more than one packet on their invoice? Did they buy 3 or 4? And how that kind of shook out, seeing if there was any way we could possibly bundle some of these things in the future. And so what you're seeing here is in Power BI, on the left side, you're seeing one set of products, and on the right side, you're seeing the correlation of those products to other products. And so if we go to the next slide, we were actually able to pull out from that one of our most purchased products, which is our traumatic brain injury packet, and take a look next to it and see all the other different packets that were sold with that. And it led us to suggesting to that department, they may want to take a look at this and bundle some of these based on practice area or even the level of practice years an attorney's in. And that actually leads me to my next slide, because as we went down that road, we did start discussing, oh, what if we took something like taking depositions was a very rudimentary thing for our members, a very basic packet, and pair it with something else. Well, we didn't really see anything over there that we thought would pair well with it. So this is one of those cases that you may have a thought that, hey, this might be worthwhile. And then it's good to get in the data and find out, maybe not quite yet, or wow, no, that was way off.
No, that's outstanding. I mean, obviously you can theorize something and then you just got to go check the data. And that's
exactly,
you know, it's all about making decisions with confidence, and it might be confidently march forward or confidently stop. So that's great.
So on this last slide here of our data, I believe, we really got very far down into some data, and we were looking at our membership tenure and litigation packet purchases across that. And so what we found, actually, and it's a little hard to tell from this, but 11% of our packets were sold to first members, which was actually something that really challenged us. We thought you needed to be more in your 2 to 5 year range, and we were way off on that, which was good to know. And we actually found that our first year members are over twice as likely to purchase a packet than any other year of our membership. So instead of holding back we usually hold back marketing on those things from that segment of memberships. And so now we want to go at it a little bit more strategically and see what we get there. So I think what all of this comes down to say is you're going to make decisions either way in your business. I think it's always better to have some data behind what you're doing. Either, yes, this looks good, let's move forward, or no, that doesn't look right, let's reassess and maybe move ahead a different way. And I think that's what we've got out of it the most since we've started using it.
That's great. So let's talk about your secrets to success. Tell us about those.
So not so secret, don't want them to be too secret, but really for us, setting goals and benchmarks, being able to see where we started and come back and and measure ourselves. We were really ambitious a couple of years ago. We created an internal data analytics working group, put together this really aggressive data analytics strategy, what we were going to try and do. And we bit off a little more than we could chew, not so much in a bad way. Oh my gosh, it was a bad decision. It was more, we had more data we knew what to do with. So we had to come back a little and just take kind of the high points and move forward, which was a little hard for us. We want to tell everybody all the things, but when it comes down to it, when you're talking to your executives or departments, you have to be able to bring it back to a very high level for them and understand what their goals are.
And then you got your last one there. I love ask the weird questions.
Yeah. So this one, this is really my favorite, and I'll be the first one in the meetings to say, okay, guys, we can't go down any rabbit holes today, so please stop me. Because we do go down some pretty crazy rabbit holes when we start to see any little sort of trend. During this time of COVID, I think some of that stuff is really important to ask some really off the wall questions. Like we got so far down into one group of data that we were asking, well, what percentage of women are taking discounts on products and things like that. And what we found was actually when we offered our female members a discount, they started buying at a higher rate than men did. And so that's something we're now trying to discuss and work into our programs of how can we, meet them in that space? Why are they having this behavior? So that's really awesome. The last thing I want to say, I kind of breezed over challenging assumptions. I talked a little bit about it in some of my other data, but really, if your association's been making the same assumptions for the past 5 years, really pulling the data out and taking a look at it just to confirm that it's right is worth it. It really is.
So what's next? I mean, you sound like you've done a lot already, but where do you want to take this initiative next?
So it never ends. There's always new data, new fields, new things all the time. But for us, we're actually trying not to do so much new, is look at what we're actually still doing. Every time we do our agile meetings, we try to draw some of it back to our data governance. And that's where I really think your agile analytics, your executive dashboards, and your governance all have to really tie together. You have to know what a member is and what another person thinks the member is and what your member thinks they are. Because if you don't have the same term across different business units, one department's going to think you've got 700 members, the other thinks you've got 675, and it's like, where is that disconnect? So we've been really putting an emphasis on our data governance now that we're talking about data so much more. The next thing that we're doing is we launched a new website in July of this year. And so it's very important for us to be able to go back and look at what our previous site was doing compared to this site now. And it's been very surprising in a very good way. We've had a lot of increased sales, but being able to blend a lot of different data sources together, we're really getting a fuller picture of what our members are doing across our site. Buying 2 or 3 things, coming back a few days later, buying a few things more. It's very important for us to see that level of engagement right now in this time. That's the biggest strategic goal for our year, is engagement with our members. So we're trying to show that with the data that we have. Well,
that's great. Well, I think our time is about up. So I want to thank you for participating in this segment. Lacey, your input was outstanding. And I suspect that the listeners will be able to take your suggestions and your experience and put them to action in their own organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thanks. A couple of questions. Thanks to folks that have been putting questions in during that video. Rob, if you see that question about the member engagement score that Joe Stangl asked.
Yep, that's a great one. And in fact, I know at the beginning when you did the survey that member engagement score was the #1 thing that people were curious about. So I thought that this would be a good one to talk about. So, the people hear a lot about member engagement scoring or just engagement scoring in general. It doesn't have to be for members. And the concept behind it, and for some of this, this may be 101, but I want to make sure everybody everybody gets this. So the concept here is that you try to score all the activity that are going on with your members. So, or your non-members. And so the idea is maybe you give 1 to 2 points for someone opening or clicking on an email. Maybe you give them 5 to 6 points for posting something in your community. And then you might give a whole series of points for somebody attending and doing things that happen in your AMS, such as registering and attending for a free webinar. Maybe that's 50 points. Paying for and attending your annual conference, maybe 100 points. Participating on a committee, 150 points. On your board, 250. Calling a member of Congress, 500. So I think you get the idea. So the concept is you first of all need to think about what you view are the most valuable activities. And if you were working with a firm like ours, we'll help you through that process. But you, first of all, create that continuum of activities. And remember, it's not just data that's coming from your AMS. You want it to come from all your various systems that you're pulling and blending in your analytics tool. And then there's other things you want to think about, such as decay. Certainly an email that somebody opened 6 months ago is maybe not something you want to count in your scoring. So that would decay, or when someone leaves a committee, they're no longer getting the points. In my old organization, we actually wanted to grant points to our board members a full year after they left the board because we felt like they still had a lot of input into direction, and there was a lot of members who still looked up to them. So we gave them even additional points. So those are the things you think about. And then ultimately what happens is you put this in your analytics tool, you let the tool grind out and calculate all the numbers. And what you end up with are your engagement scores. So now that you have that, what does that do for you? Well, certainly knowing who your most engaged members are, and it could be individuals, or if you're a trade association, you can roll those up to your organization level. And in fact, at my organization, we were individuals who were members of hospitals who were a part of health systems. So we rolled it up to 3 levels. But once you get there, then you know who are the most engaged. So those are obviously your folks that you want to contact if you want to do advocacy, if you want donations, if you need more volunteers or members of your board. Those are the most engaged. That's gives you that information. Now the flip side of that is the least engaged members. Wouldn't it be wonderful to know who the leaky bucket was 6 months before renewal time? So now suddenly you have this list of individuals or organizations that are not interacting with your organization much. And I think we could probably all agree they probably are maybe at jeopardy of renewing. So maybe you can contact them. Maybe you can send them a coupon to attend one of your events for a reduced price, something to generate activity so that you don't lose them. And then finally, the other thing that's really easy that comes out of this, and there's many other use cases, but the other one that's really easy is your most engaged non-members. And obviously that's your acquisition target list. In fact, I remember just handing this list to a membership coordinator and said, just please call these people because based on their activity, they're our best targets. And before that, we would just study our AMS and we'd look at other tools and we just try to infer who are our most engaged non-members, but we really didn't know. This makes it very clear and most importantly allows you to act with confidence. And that's what we always like to see what happens when you're running an analytics tool. So Wade, I don't know if there was any last questions you wanted to cover, but that was I think a great one that I saw right at the end.
Yeah, this one I think is good from Christina Eckhoff, and she asked about how you're building up that member retention chart. And I posted that question so everybody could see.
Okay, so member retention in terms of a chart, obviously, what you need to do, and this is where an analytics tool just simply does a better job than a transactional system like your AMS, is you're basically taking, the history of, who was eligible for renewal versus who actually renewed. And then you want to do that year over year or month over month, depending on how you do your renewals, so that you can easily make that comparison. The problem with trying to do that in a transactional system is that people can change data. that affects data in the past. And then suddenly, you know, obviously, then suddenly your renewal, your retention numbers get thrown off. So, but if you're snapshotting that data and moving it into your analytics tool, it becomes a fairly easy exercise.
Can we do one more question, Rob?
Yeah, my pleasure.
So there were a couple of questions asked about, like for smaller organizations, is something like this attainable? And so I'll post the question.
Okay, so that's a good one, and I'll just take it. So, you know, just for us, and I can't answer for other vendors in the market, but our largest client, and I'm going to start with the largest, and I know that wasn't what you asked, is about a $250 million revenue association. So you're all like, oh my God, we don't make that kind of money, we don't have those kind of resources. But our smallest client has $3.5 million of revenue. So we have not worked with clients smaller than that. It's possible that we could, and but what really drives the cost and the complexity is how many different data sources you want to bring in. So my recommendation is if you're on the smaller side, or even if you're a mid-size or large-size organization, but you're concerned about the value that an analytics tool will bring, well then start smaller. Pick a certain part of your AMS. So maybe you're just going to focus on membership, or you're just going to focus on conferences, and blend in that or bring in that source. And if you think there's one other source of data that would add value, so let's say if you want to do membership or event conferences, I think a real valuable data that works with that is your email activity, because I think the combination of those two tell you a lot about, you know, if you send out about a bunch of emails, you then can check to say, well, were those the people that registered, or did this particular email cause more registration versus that? So to keep it cost effective, then just start small with a couple of things. And then if you can prove value to your executives, they might say, well, you know, we're getting so much value out of this new information, it's worth making a little bit more of a commitment. So now let's consider another part of the organization that we want to go after and really look at that data.
Okay, great. So there were other questions and many of comments that maybe some comments we didn't address, but Rob, and I think you could address them maybe separately in an email to folks since it's in the question section.
Yep, we can.
I think at this point, what I'm going to do is have Julie kind of wrap it up a couple of minutes just to share a couple things to wrap up. But I mean, excellent overview of what's possible and, you know, where associations need to be going to, thanks to Rob and to our practitioners, Lacey and Terry.
Okay, thank you, Wade. Can everyone see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so to wrap up, first off, thank you, Rob and Terry and Lacey. That was a great job with a lot of information shared with us. So to those of you in the audience, just to let you know, we will be sending out a follow-up email where we will link today's webinar recording to it, as well as the survey questions will be linked in there. The slide deck, if necessary, we'll link that in there, and anything that we think will be useful to you. On a final note, I did want to share with you today how your association can save money and put it back into your mission. On your screen, you will see a 15-minute agenda that I use in an initial consultation with associations, because I am the association practice leader for U.S. Transaction Corporation. We're a merchant services company, and we specialize in saving 20% or more for associations. We look for those ways to save you money in your credit card processing fees, and we find it with solutions that are integrated into all major AMS systems, including NetForum, IMIS, Fontiva, Optify, with no additional IT development needed, which serves to improve your bottom line, put money back into your mission, and improve your PCI compliance posture, your reconciliations, so on and so forth. So if you're interested in having that initial 15-minute consultation with me, please feel free to reach out for me. You'll see my follow-up email, and all my information will be there, including a calendar link. I'm going to try and share it with you today, but I'm not sure that it's going to come through. Hopefully you will all receive that. So it'll be in the question box if it came through. And then finally, I did want to let you know our upcoming events. If you go to, you can see here on my screen, ustranscorp.com/education. That's the website where we list our events, including registration links, so you can look forward and register for any of the events that work for you. Again, these are all for CAE or CPE credit. So I'll also include that in the follow-up email so that you can quickly link to that. Thank you for all of you that attended. If I don't have anything else for you, I don't know, Rob or Shepard, Wade, that's all I have.
Nope. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.